plane vanished over the ocean. No bodies were found. After 3 days of swimming, no survivors reported. Everyone moved on except Max, who was still alive. And 1,500 days in the Amazon jungle, he came back home. The plane jolted violently mid-air, waking Max from a restless sleep. Passengers screamed as oxygen masks dropped and luggage crashed from overhead bins. Outside, storm clouds swallowed the sunlight. Lightning cracked so close it lit up the entire cabin. Max clutched the armrests, heart racing. He was flying over the ocean, en route to South America for a work assignment, when the engine exploded with a deafening roar. The aircraft split apart. Everything went black. When Max opened his eyes, he was floating in open water, debris scattered around him. The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, and there was no sign of land or life. He couldn't remember how he got out of the wreckage. He couldn't hear anyone else. Just the water, the waves, his own breath. Panic rose in his throat, but survival instincts kicked in. Max tightened the straps of a floating seat cushion and began to swim. Slowly, deliberately, with no sense of direction, only the hope that land existed somewhere. 1 day turned into 2. 2 turned into 3. His lips cracked. His limbs ached. His mind drifted in and out of consciousness. But he kept swimming. On the 3rd night, just before collapse, Max spotted something dark against the moonlit horizon. Trees. Land. Hope. With the last of his strength, he kicked toward it. Max collapsed onto the riverbank, coughing and shaking. Alive, barely. But the real fight, the one against nature, hunger, and loneliness, had only just begun. Max lay on the muddy riverbank, gasping for air. His body trembled, sunburned and exhausted. Salt water stung the open cuts on his arms and legs, and his muscles throbbed with every breath. But he was alive. He sat up slowly, scanning the dense wall of green in front of him. Towering trees, thick vines, and the endless rustling of unknown creatures. The Amazon jungle, wild, unforgiving, and unfamiliar. With no food or clean water, Max forced himself to move. His legs were weak, but he stumbled forward, following the river inland. The jungle floor was slippery, covered in leaves, insects, and roots that tangled around his feet. He stopped by a tree and used a sharp stone to tear part of his shirt into strips. Carefully, he cleaned his wounds with river water and wrapped the cloth around his arms. It wasn't much, but it would stop the bleeding for now. His stomach growled loudly. "No food. No water," he muttered. "I need something. Anything." As he pushed deeper into the jungle, the sun began to dip behind the trees. Suddenly, he spotted it, a coconut tree. Max's eyes widened. He rushed over and picked up a fallen coconut. With the same stone, he began to strike it over and over until the shell finally cracked. Sweet water dripped out. He drank it greedily, letting it run down his chin. He had found his first miracle in the wild. But the jungle wasn't done testing him yet. Max sat beneath the coconut tree, the cracked shell in his hands. The water had quenched his thirst for now, but he needed more. Carefully, he climbed the rough trunk, reaching for another ripe coconut hanging just out of reach. With one final stretch, he grabbed it, but as he slid back down, a sharp edge of bark tore across his palm. He cried out, nearly falling. Blood oozed from the fresh cut on his hand. He dropped to his knees and held the wound tightly. "Great," he muttered. "More blood. More problems." Max took a deep breath and tore another strip from his shirt. He wrapped it tightly around his hand. Then, with a handful of soft jungle leaves, he covered the cloth to keep the dirt out. Pain pulsed with every movement, but he couldn't stop now. He cracked open the second coconut, poured the water into the first empty shell, and used broad leaves to cover it. A natural canteen, primitive but effective. As the sun faded, Max built a small shelter using fallen branches and palm leaves. His body screamed for rest, but his mind remained alert. Strange sounds echoed through the forest, shrieks, growls, rustling in the dark. He huddled close to his shelter, gripping a sharpened stick, heart pounding. "I can't die here," he whispered to the night. "Not like this." With only moonlight above and jungle shadows all around, Max lay in silence. Alive, injured, but determined to see another day. Morning broke with a heavy mist clinging to the trees. Max woke stiff and cold, every muscle sore. His bandaged hand throbbed, but he had survived the night. His body demanded food. He couldn't last much longer without it. He followed the sound of water deeper into the jungle and soon reached a wide river, the same one he had collapsed beside days earlier. The water shimmered in the sunlight, cool and inviting. Max drank carefully from his hands, then filled his coconut shell and sealed it again with leaves. As he stood, movement in the water caught his eye. Fish. Max gripped a sharp stick he had carved the night before. He moved slowly, stepping into the shallows. The fish darted around him, fast and slippery. He stood still, waiting, watching. Then jab. His stick struck the water. He missed. Again he waited. This time, when he thrust the spear forward, he felt it hit something solid. He pulled it back. A small fish wriggled at the end of the stick. Max let out a breath of pure relief. He returned to his shelter and built a small fire using dry twigs and spark stones from his pocketknife. Slowly, carefully, he roasted the fish over the flame, the scent drawing his attention more than any meal he'd had in years. When he took the first bite, it was dry and burnt, but to Max it tasted like survival. In the jungle, even the smallest victory meant everything. Days passed. Max kept track by carving lines into a rock near his shelter, one for each sunrise. The fish from the river kept him fed. Coconuts quenched his thirst. But deep down, he knew this couldn't last forever. "I can't just survive," he muttered to himself. "I need to get out of here." The jungle was too dense to walk through for miles. No trails, no help. His only chance: build a boat. Max began collecting wood, branches, fallen trunks, anything strong enough to float. It took hours just to drag a few logs back to camp. He lashed them together with jungle vines, weaving them tightly like rope. It was crude, uneven, but it held. Each day he worked under the burning sun, cutting, tying, adjusting. Each night, he sat by the fire, staring into the flames, imagining the world beyond the trees. One evening, while cutting a thick branch with a sharpened stone, Max slipped. The stone sliced across his ankle. "Damn it!" he cried out, dropping to the ground. He crawled back to his shelter, gritting his teeth through the pain. Again, he cleaned the cut with river water, covered it with leaves, and tightened a cloth wrap. Lying flat, breathing heavily, Max stared up at the jungle canopy. He had food. He had water. He had a plan. But now he also had a new truth. This place wanted to break him. He just wasn't ready to break. Max woke to the sound of thunder rolling across the sky. Thick clouds darkened the canopy above. The jungle, usually alive with birds and insects, had fallen eerily silent. He looked at his half-built raft. It sat at the edge of the riverbank, tied with vines, barely holding together. The storm hit by afternoon. Rain came down in sheets, turning the ground to mud. The river rose quickly, churning with force. Max scrambled to cover his shelter with palm leaves, trying to protect what little he had. His tools, firewood, his stored coconuts, his raft. But nature was relentless. A powerful gust tore part of the shelter apart. The fire hissed and vanished beneath the flood. Max rushed to the raft, trying to pull it further up the bank. His bare feet slipped, sending him crashing into the mud. He dragged himself up, gasping, soaked and shivering. By nightfall, the storm passed, but the damage was done. The raft was intact, but waterlogged and heavy. His firewood, ruined. His food, gone, swept away in the flood. Max sat alone in the dark, bruised and defeated. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to cry. But then, something inside him shifted. A voice, maybe his own, maybe survival itself, whispered, "Start again." And so, with shaking hands and an aching body, Max began gathering wood once more. A storm could wash away everything, but not his will to survive. The jungle smelled of wet earth and smoke as Max started over. He rebuilt his fire first. Using sun-dried bark and the few dry twigs he had stored under the shelter's remains, he created sparks with his stone and pocket knife. It took hours, but eventually a flame caught, glowing like hope in the damp shadows. Next came the raft. Each day, Max collected thicker logs, lashing them tighter with braided vines. He sharpened sticks into paddles and reinforced the base with layers of palm bark. The new design was better, stronger, more stable. He was learning not just to survive but to adapt. Fishing became routine. He carved hooks from bone and used jungle worms for bait. His meals were small but steady. Coconuts remained his water supply, and he carefully stored them in shaded spots to keep them cool. With every task, Max felt his body grow leaner, tougher. The jungle that once felt like a cage now felt like a teacher. At night, he sat beside the fire, staring at the stars. His mind drifted to memories, his home, his wife, her smile. "I wonder if she thinks I'm dead," he whispered. The thought stung more than any cut or storm. He carved a number into the raft's wood. Day 100. It had been that long. But he wasn't done. The raft was almost ready, and Max had one goal left: get home. It was early morning when Max pushed the raft into the water. The river, once a place of quiet survival, now became his highway home. With a sharpened stick as a paddle and his supplies tied down with vines, Max climbed aboard, heart pounding with fear and hope. The raft bobbed and swayed as the current carried him forward. Trees blurred past on both sides, birds shrieked overhead, and strange animals watched from the shadows. He had no map, no direction, just the flow of the river and faith that it would lead him somewhere, anywhere. Days passed. The sun burned by day and the cold bit at night. Max caught rain in his coconut shells and fished from the raft when the water was calm. Sometimes he drifted under cliffs or tangled vines that nearly tipped him over. Once, a crocodile surfaced near his raft. Its cold eyes locked with his, but it disappeared without attack. Each bend in the river brought new dangers. Rapids, rocks, even waterfalls he narrowly escaped. But Max held tight, fighting against exhaustion and hunger. On day 1000, he spotted something new on the horizon. A thin column of smoke. People. His heart raced. He paddled with all the strength he had left. That night he reached a small village. Locals rushed to help him, wide-eyed, amazed. He couldn't speak. He just collapsed, whispering the same word over and over. Home, home. He was one step closer. The villagers took Max in like a lost brother. They fed him rice, fruit, and fish, real meals for the first time in nearly 3 years. A local healer cleaned his wounds and gave him herbal medicine. For the first time in months, he slept without fear. When he finally regained his strength, Max told them his story: the plane crash, the ocean, the jungle, the raft. They listened in silence, some shaking their heads in disbelief. One man, an older fisherman, offered him a ride downriver to the nearest town. From there, Max was able to contact the U.S. Embassy. Within days, he was flown back to the States, thin, scarred, but alive. The world thought he was dead. News reports called it a miracle. Plane crash survivor found after 1,500 days in Amazon. But Max didn't care about the headlines. He cared about only one thing: his wife. He arrived in his hometown quietly, without alerting anyone. He took a cab to the street they had once lived on, heart racing as the house came into view. Same white fence, same mailbox, same garden. He walked up to the door and froze. A man stepped out holding a small child. Then his wife appeared behind him, smiling at the man, not at Max. His breath caught. The world stopped. She had moved on. Max didn't knock. He turned away, the weight of 1,500 days crashing down harder than any storm.